Good morning. Welcome to today's webinar event. My name is Joshua, and I'm going to be your presenter today. It's promptly 11 a.m. Eastern Time on Friday. We're here to discuss entering your employees and contractors in Church Windows Payroll today. Before we get started on that, a couple things right away. If you've never attended a webinar event, click the little red arrow at the sidebar of your control panel there. It allows you to be able to minimize the little control panel. This is particularly helpful if you have a single monitor, or if you've got a dual monitor setup, just drag that webinar control panel off to your second desktop. Again, this is all just to get the full visual presentation of the webinar event. Second, we do record these events, so a video of today's event will be available on our website sometime between now and early next week. Again, we do try to make a point of recording each of these and every time, barring any technical issues. Also, if you have questions for me, please type those into the questions portion of the webinar control panel. It's just me today. It's not a terribly large group, but I will try my best to keep an eye on the questions, see what we can't do to get those answered for you. I do ask that simply we do try to keep the topics, the questions topical, meaning about setting up or adding your employees. I may ask you to contact technical support with regards to a question, maybe not because I don't want to answer it, but simply I may need more information, and a support call may be the best way to handle or deal with that. And just finally, by way of a quick reminder here, this is our first webinar in April today, but I do want to remind folks, you may have gotten the email from us, we do have our workbook flash sale that we've had going on for the past this is now the third day, where our training workbooks are on sale for the digital download file for $5 each. That sale is going on until midnight tonight, where you can literally go in and purchase any one of the Church Windows training workbooks for $5 each, which is far less than the original $12 that they normally are. Again, that ends at midnight. This is important because we are starting to now implement more of our webinars in line with the actual training workbooks. So today's event, Payroll, is in our P101, pages 11 through 20 today, about adding employees and contractors. So these workbooks are oftentimes used in keeping with our webinar topics here. So those workbooks are very, very helpful. Again, the sale ends at midnight. Go in and order those now because they'll go back up to their regular price at after midnight tonight. All right, so let's go to, we're going to talk about entering our employees and our contractors. So let's start with contractors. They're generally the simplest ones to deal with. When we go to data setup here, notice we've got in our menu here, first option, employee file, but then the second one is our independent contractor file. Okay? So a quick note about the setting up of your contractors. You don't need Church Windows Payroll in order to be able to set up and pay your contractors and issue a 1099 miscellaneous form for them. You can pay those contractors through the accounting module and still produce a 1099 miscellaneous from accounting. So, again, you can pay those folks there and not set them up in Payroll. However, if you choose to set up your contractors in Payroll, this is where you would do that. We simply click on Independent Contractor File, and then we already have a contractor in here, but it starts by clicking the Add button right up here in the upper right-hand corner. Let me get my highlighter here, draw some focus there. Right there's our Add button. Okay, and so when we click Add, it opens up the Add Independent Contractor. And here we would just simply type in the name, the address. If they're doing business as a different name than the name of the contractor themselves, you can enter that. Any tax ID number, oftentimes for like a contractor, that may be their social security number. But then you would click over under the Pay Labels tab, and here the pay labels can be identified or constructed for each contractor independently. So like here, if I was setting up a contractor for something, I can describe exactly what I'm paying them for and enter their rate. We can have backup federal withholding and choose to withhold state withholding from them. So a question that's coming through that I'm seeing here already is, what's the advantages or disadvantages of adding contractors here? Well, certainly this would be one of them, is that you can have, you can withhold or back up federal income tax, have that withheld for contractors here, and state not based on tax tables, but by a specific amount for state taxes. I can't do that in accounting. So that would certainly be an advantage of paying a contractor through payroll versus through accounting. However, once I've sent up the basic information, including the pay labels here, I would simply click OK. Whoops, cancel through that, sorry. And then it would add a similar looking vendor or contractor here to our list that we're seeing here for Joe Greenthumb, who's our lawn service. And you can set up to 3 different pay labels for your contractors in payroll. Again, another advantage of paying them through, say, payroll versus accounting is I can have a contractor who is paid using 3 different labels to identify what they're paid for through payroll versus through accounting, where I don't have this pay label option. And we notice down here in the bottom right we do have the withholding. So if they tell me at one point that they don't want to have me withhold taxes, and I want to change that after I set them up, I can come in here and change that. It also does, like it does for our employees, have a totals tab where it shows how much I've paid them throughout the year and how much taxes we've withheld for them, and the dates that they were paid with their net pay amount. Okay, so yeah, once I'd set up those contractors, I would simply click OK through that. One of the things that we encourage you folks is that, don't speculate as to whether a person is considered an employee versus an independent contractor. There is lots of information on the IRS website that allows you to be able to determine or identify the factors determining whether someone is an independent contractor or an employee of the church. It's very important. Yeah, that's not something that we set. That's really more based on IRS or government guidelines. And so check that out. If you go to the IRS's website, you can find information on that will help you make that determination. Okay? I'm sorry, folks. Forgive me my voice here. I'm just getting over a cold here, so that's why I'm kind of sounding a little more grovelly than normal here. I appreciate it. When we go back into data setup and employee file, and again, similar to our contractor file, we have an add button here in the upper right corner that when we're wanting to add a new employee to our database, that we would simply click on that, and it opens up the Add Employee window. Okay? Basically just basic information about the employee, their name, last name, first name, middle name, the address information for them, Social Security number, what is their federal filing status, single or married. Of course, that's going to be taken from their completed W-4 form. We would always, of course, encourage you to get completed W-4s and W-9s from your employees and your contractors to keep on record. So the church has some verification as to what the employee wanted you to set up as the construction of their pay. The church doesn't determine how many exemptions they have. They do. That's their responsibility as the employee. So, all of this information that we would enter here, certainly with regards to filing status, would be gathered from their W-4. Okay? So once you've entered, again, a new employee name, again, for the purpose of expediency, I'm not going to enter somebody here. You would simply click OK through that. If you're adding multiple employees, simultaneously or consecutively, we would recommend checking this box, leave screen open. Then as you click OK through that, it just adds the employee to the database and yet leaves the Add New Employee screen open there. Okay? Just a time saver, fewer mouse clicks. Once an employee is added to the database, we'll go ahead and add one here. I don't need to complete a whole bunch of information on it. So first name, we'll just go ahead and enter Emma here and click OK. It does remind us here that we do have to go to the payroll system administration menu to set up the account numbers for the employees. And what we mean by account numbers is the accounts to which their pay is going to be transferred to or post to in our accounting module. That's what that friendly reminder is about. So we're going to go, yep, we're aware of that. We click OK through that. It now adds the employee with the information we've added to the left-hand side of the screen here. Okay. One of the most important things to keep in mind about this is, and you have this at the add window as well, is the minister box at the top. So right here, notice you've got the ministers box. What that tells the system is, by checking that is that they are a minister, an ordained clergy person, and they're telling the system in essence by checking that they're not subject to standard withholding for Social Security and Medicare. Okay. If you're a Canadian user, then that is the vow of perpetual poverty, and it'll say poverty vow box instead of minister. Okay. But that's so important. Ministers aren't subject to standard Social Security and Medicare withholding as the rest of us, and so if they are a minister, that 99.9% of the time, I can't think of a reason why if they're a minister they wouldn't check that box. Okay. That just systematically tells the system we are not to withhold Social Security and Medicare, and subsequently the church is not then going to be matching any as the employer. Okay. So we've added Emma to our database here. And now we're beginning to work with the various tabs down here across the bottom. General 1, General 2, Federal, State, Local deductions, allowances, and totals. Okay. So General 1 opens and it determines the type of employee that they are. Are they hourly or are they salaried? Okay. Hourly, then, at the bottom half of the window, we would recommend certainly entering a default number of hours that the employee will generally work. It can always be changed as you're calculating payroll. But if you pay biweekly and they work 40 hours a week, and that's how it occurs each and every time, enter 80 hours and then their hourly rate. So we're going to say, we pay her twice a month or every other week. We're going to say biweekly versus, say, semi-monthly. That's a distinguishing factor here that is very important that folks overlook. Biweekly versus semi-monthly is 24 pays during the year versus 26. So there are 2 additional pay periods in the year when they're paid biweekly versus semi-monthly. Okay. Now the church does determine that. Okay. But it doesn't matter whether they're hourly or salaried, you have to choose the appropriate pay frequency or period. Okay? So I would enter 80 hours if she were hourly and then enter her hourly rate, and then I've set the hourly rate and the number of hours, and it'll just default to populating that with 80 and 12 every time I calculate the pay. But again, I can always change it on the fly as I'm calculating the payroll. Or if she is salaried, we would come in here and choose, say, hours worked of, 0, but under the pay rate, we would put in, $1,200, whatever the pay period, or however much she was paid as a gross amount right here, and then change it over to salaried. When someone is no longer employed by the church, but cannot be deleted, we would again recommend coming in here and assigning or terminating them right here, terminated. Then they don't show up. Then they won't show up in your active employees to pay every time you calculate a payroll. Employees after a period of time can certainly be deleted. There are additional pay labels here: overtime, regular, additional. If the employees earn accumulated vacation or sick time, meaning based on every pay period that they work, they earn X number of vacation days or sick time, you would enter that here under accumulating value or hours per pay period. However, if they basically contingent on their employment at the start of each year, they have a certain number of vacation hours or sick time available, we would not enter that here. We would use the calculate adjustment to feature to get that entered. We're not going to go into the details of that today. However, it is dealt with at the bottom of page 14 on our workbook, where it talks about the calculate adjustment to get those amounts entered. I think we actually have a video out there on that as well right now. So let's roll over to our General 2 tab. So here then is where we would enter any alternate address or an alternate address information for the employee, as well as any various or miscellaneous information about them. Is there a data, what's their date of birth? Is there a description for their job position? Do we want to track, when they were hired or when they were terminated, the date of their last raise and the amount? Is there a last review date that we want to track and a next review date? Okay. Just basic information about the employee, often very helpful. Finally, down here under emergency contact information, strongly advised to put that in case of an emergency with contact phone number. And finally, our banking EF information for EFT. So if the church utilizes or takes advantage of the direct deposit feature that Church Windows Payroll offers, this is where you would enter the employee's banking information. By way of brief description, Church Windows Payroll produces what's called an NACHA compliant file. It meets federal banking standards, where basically the file that can be exported from the software can be uploaded to the bank's website, and your employees can be paid electronically. And of course, with that feature, a stub would be produced during the payroll calculation process to distribute to those employees for that, of course. If you're not using direct deposit, then you won't check the use direct deposit. But if you do check it, then we simply check that, and now then the bottom of the window becomes live for you to enter the, banking routing number and account number for the employee, type of account, etc. Okay. Then we roll over to our federal tab. So once we get to our federal tab, then this is again where we would enter confirm their federal filing status. Are they paying in their taxes based on the federal tax tables? How many exemptions, again, they've recorded or asked us to enter based on, again, on their W-4. We can also have the system withhold an additional amount or percent for federal income tax. If we, don't have that information. Can't check that. So if we go to the federal tab, we click apply. If I go back up to my minister here, Larry, notice here minister's SE tax box is eligible to be checked. The only way that box is eligible to be checked is when someone is marked as a minister. Okay? If they're not marked as a minister, then minister's SE tax is irrelevant. Okay? So that's just why that's important to be aware of that. So we're going to go back to Emma again. So we're just going to say that at this point she's, saying she's going to be, she's got her and herself and one child. So she's requested on her W-4 that we'll have 2 exemptions, and it's based on the used tax tables. And when we scroll down further, there's one more box to if there's a retirement plan that we need to show in box 13 on our W-2. State works in a very similar manner, except you have to make sure you're choosing the appropriate withholding state. It varies from one state to the next. Again, though, it has a use tax tables function where, again, we can check that if they're withholding based on state tax tables with the additional amount or percent as well and in exemptions. Okay? Generally, folks, this is all going to be gathered or taken from their W-4. If you're a state where there are local taxes, a local tax would need to be set up under the local tax wizard. Again, we're not going to go into that today, but we're going to say, yes, she is subject to Gehanna tax, state, tax that we've set up here locally. I can also have an additional amount or percent withheld, in addition to the percentage that the local tax is set up with. Again, I strongly advise clicking apply between each one of these just to make sure that our changes or the entries that we're making are being saved. Deductions. So deductions are not taxes. These are things that generally, employees are voluntarily participating in. Health insurance plans, contributions, pension or retirement deductions, things like that. Not always so voluntary. Wage garnishments, child support, what have you, would also be set up as deductions. But we're going to say, hey, she's participating in our health insurance plan. I would enter the amount that would be deducted from her paycheck based on a frequency or a percent. Click apply. Roll over to the allowances tab. Allowances are amounts that are paid to employees above and beyond or separate from regular gross pay. So frequently ministers will have a housing allowance there. So if we go back to our senior pastor, Larry here, we do see a housing allowance. But just keep in mind, folks, that if you've got an employee who does 2 jobs for the church, a layperson, doesn't have to be a minister, you can set up their regular job position under regular and then use allowances as a means to be able to record and pay them. This is particularly important if you're wanting to link them or charge 2 different expense accounts in accounting. Okay. And finally, there's a totals tab here that simply shows us what our W-2 and 941 totals are for the employee for the year. So right here it says W-2 941 totals, and it shows the year to date. And then it does also, as we scroll down the screen, it does break it down by quarter. Okay, so just more information. Also, if there's how much accumulated vacation or sick time they also have available to them. Okay, so we're really right at about 20 minutes. That's a quick whirlwind kind of tour around the setting up of the allowances and the deductions in payroll. Let me see what questions we've got here. If you've seen what you came to see, you can leave the webinar event. Thank you so much for attending. We hope it's been helpful. But let me see what questions we've got over here now. Can this information be imported or exported from a payroll service? Jacqueline, at this point, no. The answer to that simply is no. I'm not sure we'll ever allow an import, but there may be, when the payroll module is rewritten here in the next 12 to 18 months, there may be an opportunity, much like accounting and donations, to export the data from payroll outside of the software. But at this point, doesn't exist either from the import or export standpoint in the software yet. You can export it as reports as a PDF file, but as any other option, no. We have a salaried employee who also gets some hourly wages. Do you have a suggestion for handling that? Sure. What you would want to do, Pat, is you would set up under their employee file, their regular salary as under regular hours worked, and then as you're calculating the payroll, like if this is an incidental feature, what you would want to do is, sorry, it's generating my list of employees here, folks. Let's say Jimmy, he's not salaried, but he's hourly. Let's use Larry. He's our pastor, but he's a salaried employee. We go to next. I cannot enter hours worked here for regular, but I can under additional. So right here, I could key in a number of hours and a pay rate, and it would add that all to one check. So I would recommend using the additional feature here. Right here, I can say, okay, he worked 10 hours at, $15 an hour for additional, and then that'll just get added to their pay. Great question. You're most welcome. All right, I'm just going to wait and see if there's anybody kind of typing in, some frantic questions here at the end here. I know that sometimes they can be a little bit time consuming, so I don't want to cut our webinar off here too soon, but it does look like folks are kind of diving out pretty quickly. All right, well, I'm not seeing anything else coming in, folks. We hope the event's been helpful. We look forward to seeing you at other Church Windows webinar events in future, but I'll go ahead and end the event for everyone, and have a great weekend. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.